Hello and welcome to another episode of Wheel of Horror, the podcast where two lifelong childhood best friends spin a wheel every day leading up to Halloween. It chooses the horror film and they discuss it. Today we're talking about 1985's Day of the Dead, which was directed by George A. Romero. I'm your co-host Alec.
And this is Joe.
And boy, oh boy, dude, 4 years in the making. It's kind of crazy. The first episode you were on for was Night of the Living Dead in 2020. And here we are 4 years later, wrapping up the trilogy.
Wow, yeah, this one's been a long time coming. And that Night of the Living Dead episode, that was my very first appearance on this podcast and still one of my favorite conversations. It's obviously one of my favorite movies, but yeah, it's always just fun talking Romero. We did Dawn of the Dead, we did Creep Show, of course, and Martin.
Yep. Yeah, I was trying to remember. You were not on for the remake of Dawn of the Dead, but you were on for the 78 version, right?
Correct.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Perfect, dude. Yeah. I always associate George Romero and John Carpenter with you. I know those are like your boys. Would you say those are your two favorite horror directors?
Oh man, that's a tough one. Yeah. I mean, they're definitely up there. I mean, obviously Wes Craven, I'd throw him in there too. But honestly, yeah, Romero and John Carpenter, if they're not my favorite, they're probably definitely the most rewatchable, in my opinion.
Yeah, dude. Because I saw it at your apartment, but you have so much memorabilia from a lot of their movies specifically. And this trilogy, I mean, Jesus, dude, how many you have like every laser disc, I'm like, what do you have?
Of this series, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I have a bunch of the VHS tapes. That's how I originally saw them. And then yeah, the original trilogy on Laserdisc, which of course, I then upgraded to Blu-ray and have the first two on 4K. So yeah, I'm covered.
Well, I was like, because I know like Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead, you can pretty much find like anywhere. They're on YouTube,
Mhm.
they're everywhere. But this movie is not. Well, it is on YouTube, but it's like the TV edit or whatever. So I was like, I'm not watching that. So it was on Hulu, I think, or Amazon or something. So I did watch it like legitimately. But you watched this on your Blu-ray, or what did you watch it on?
Yeah, I watched it on the Scream Factory Blu-ray.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, this series obviously is incredibly influential. But dude, I mean, I gotta say now, I've never seen this, but having seen all three of them, they're pretty different. Even though they're
Mhm.
all directed by the same guy, even though they're all about like zombies and stuff like that. I mean, compared to the first two specifically, this one is like a lot more talking, a lot more like we are deep into the zombie crisis at this point and potentially the last survivors. But how do you feel it compared to the last two? I mean, do you think that there's like a thread in these films that kind of like connects them or like I don't know. Like I don't really know what I'm asking, but like how do you feel comparatively to the other two?
Well, George Romero has spoken about how each of the original trilogy, it's kind of a comment about how he feels about the world in that time, in the time that he's making it.
Hmm.
Like Night of the Living Dead was coming out in the late 60s, and you had racial tension and Vietnam, and Dawn, of course, was kind of a comment on consumerism, and we've dug into all that on those episodes. And this one is interesting. I actually watched an interview with him where he spoke about it, and what he said was it's kind of about giving up. That's kind of how he felt in the mid 80s with a few years into the Reagan administration. He just felt like it was over. Like it was over for us. Just it's time to just wipe the slate clean. There's no coming back from where we were. And that I feel like that kind of pessimism, you could definitely feel that in this movie.
Oh my God. I mean, there's one line, I'm going to butcher it, but it specifically speaks to this, where the lead female and the Jamaican helicopter pilot are sitting there, and it's like, why are you doing this? Like, what is this even for? He's
Mhm.
like, because she's trying to like save humanity and come up with a cure and everything like that. And he's like, us tampering with science and all this shit is the reason we're here in the first place. And
Mhm.
dude, that line, even though it's about zombies in this, that speaks to everything that's happening with COVID. I mean, anything that the humans try to like supersede God in a way, it backfires.
Yeah, I find that whole conversation in their trailer really fascinating. And, this one is much talkier than the other
Yeah.
ones.
Oh
And
yeah.
I feel like this movie is going to kind of live or die, no pun intended, on how you feel about these conversations, how interesting you find them.
Mm.
And I think there are a lot of really fascinating conversations in this movie. And, it's interesting. This is your first time watching this movie, right?
Yeah, this one, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm really interested in getting your take because I feel like when I first saw this, and I feel it's kind of a common take that a lot of fans of this movie have is when I first saw this, it was kind of a disappointment. Me and my friends watched this probably weeks at most after renting Dawn of the Dead,
Mm.
and that was such a fun, exciting, action-packed movie. And then you watch this and it's such a like a downer and it's very claustrophobic and people are just like screaming at each other and it's very vulgar. And I think it takes time, at least it did for me, and I feel like it did for a lot of fans. It takes a little time to come around to.
Mm.
But since then, and it didn't take a lot of time actually. I feel like not long after I first saw this movie, I found myself going back to it and rewatching it. And it's still not my favorite. If I was gonna rank these, believe it or not, Night is still my favorite, even
Mm.
though I do feel like Dawn maybe has kind of pulled ahead for a lot of fans. I mean, I love them all, including this one, and I rewatch it constantly. I love all of these kind of philosophical conversations that are happening in it. And yeah, it's just one that's really grown on me, one that I go back to quite a bit.
Yeah, I can totally see that though. Like, when was the first time you saw this? How old were you?
Probably 13,
Mm.
14 in my early teen years.
Okay, so yeah, that makes perfect sense then. So like you've seen Night of the Living Dead, it's scary, there's zombies. You see Dawn of the Dead, it's like it's the alien treatment. It turns it up to 11, it's violent, it's like, a kid's gonna love that. And then you're expecting that in this one, and it's not at all. You're right, it's much more talky. It's a lot of conversations. So I think me coming into it, as a 34-year-old, I didn't mind it, but it definitely was an adjustment where I was kind of sitting there, I'm like, yeah, where are the zombies? Like for a while I was sitting there, but then at the end I was kind of just like, they weren't trying to tell that story. They were trying to tell the story of what the humans are doing now they've got the zombies at bay. Now what sort of thing? What do we do? Do we fix this? What's the plan? So yeah, I could definitely see how a 13-year-old or anybody expecting this to be like Dawn is going to be disappointed.
Mhm.
Well, no, but that being said, I mean, I think this hands down has the best zombie effects though, and the kills of any of the movies. So there's that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say this is probably Tom Savini's masterpiece.
I mean, dude, when that guy is laughing, and he's like getting his eyeball like ripped off, I was like, how in the fuck are they doing this? Like, it was crazy.
And isn't that so great? Like, how often do you see a movie now and you wonder, how did they do that?
Dude, how did they cut off that guy's arm?
Yeah. And that scene especially for whatever reason, that scene really stuck out to me because it's not especially flashy or insanely gruesome like the other scenes are. Like that scene of the amputation, it's very like just matter of fact.
Yeah.
It's like something out of a war movie.
Yep.
It's just so amazing. I mean, that's one of the reasons I go back to these movies so much is you watch it and you're like, how did they do that? And it's such a great feeling that I so rarely get watching movies today.
No, for sure. For sure. Because I think it's just because of the time. I mean, you're looking at like movies from the 80s and prior to that, everything I'm watching, I'm like, wow, how do they do that? I was just watching a show today at work called The Alaskan. It was from 1959, and they'd had an avalanche scene, and it looked really good. And I'm
Mhm,
sitting there like, if this happened now, it'd be CGI, and I'd be like, okay, it's a computer. I'm like, genuinely no idea how they shot an avalanche in Burbank in 1959.
mhm.
So I like watching old stuff specifically to see how they pull things off and if they can trick me. And this movie did constantly.
Yeah, there's something about Savini's effects, or maybe it's just the tone of George Romero's movies, where I mean, obviously there are some gnarly, just absolutely brutal, disgusting effects in this movie. It's honestly one of the probably most graphic horror movies I've ever seen. But I don't know, there's something so charming about it too. And I just watch it and I'm trying to figure out how they did it. I mean, there are like Italian zombie movies that just really kind of put me off. And I don't know, there's something about the combination of Savini and Romero that it makes me happy. I don't know, even though there's intestines being pulled out of people, it just puts a big smile on my face.
Well, I'm sure you know this, but I did do a little behind the scenes coverage of this. And apparently, George Romero took a huge pay cut to make this movie not rated so that they could do whatever they wanted. Have you heard of this?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, not only that, but his original script, which Savini described as like a phone book, it was going to be this incredible, like zombie epic, something like that nobody's ever seen before. And unfortunately, to do something that ambitious would have cost a lot of money and compromises,
Mm,
and Romero doesn't play that. So
hmm.
he made the movie he wanted to make on a fraction of what that original script would have cost.
That is the definition of a true artist right there. I mean, it's a guy that's like, I have to get this story out. I don't even care about the money. I have to get it out my way, and I want to own it when it's done. Like,
Hmm.
you do not get that today. You just don't. It's,
Yeah.
so there's like 10 directors in like this history of cinema that have that kind of mentality. I think
Mhm.
David Lynch is another one, but I really believe that George Romero, he's right there with it. He doesn't care about the money. He cares about the art. I fucking love that.
Definitely. And I think we get into this in all of our Romero discussions, but there's just this kind of DIY quality to his earlier movies, especially and they're just so much fun to watch. And I think they were inspiring when I was a kid, like you and Eric made all kinds of like crazy movies when you were kids. Like
Yeah.
me and my friends did the same thing and we would watch Romero movies and I think they inspired us. And I feel like you hear stories about how Romero's sets operated, and at least I wished as a kid who aspired to work in, show business, you wish that's how the business ran.
Mm.
Like, you'd hear about the way how he hired people, just kind of local people, you'd call them up, or you wanted to be a zombie, sure, you just show up and it's all just sounds so fun. And don't you wish Hollywood worked that way?
Oh my God, 100%. And in this movie specifically, I'm not I really don't like nepotism in Hollywood because I think like, it's the arts. It's a little hard to I don't know. But anyways, the only woman in this movie, she is the daughter of the news anchor from the first one.
Yes.
And that's a real news anchor from Pittsburgh.
Mhm.
So in this instance, I'm okay with it because I'm like, well, her dad's not like an actor or whatever. He was just like a scene in this local George A. Romero project in 1968. And now here his daughter is an actress. And he's like, dude, you want to be in my movie? Another local Pittsburgh person? Like, let's go. I love that. And she was the best. She was hands down the best in this movie.
So it's kind of funny. I have crossed paths with quite a few people in this movie.
Oh, really?
Yes, just through my job. When I worked in New York in casting, the first person from this movie that I kind of crossed paths with was the Irish helicopter pilot. In real life, his name is Jarlath. And
Yeah.
he was signing in for an audition one day, and he just has a very distinctive look about him.
He looks like Mr. Bean.
Yes, he does. And I was looking at him, I was like, "Sir, were you in Day of the Dead?" And we had a really nice conversation about it, and he came in many more times and yeah, he was a super cool guy. Also, Lori is her real name, but the woman who plays Sarah, yeah, her father was also, kind of a legendary horror host in the
Oh,
Pennsylvania area. So she's kind of like horror royalty.
no way.
And yeah, I met her over a video conference during the COVID days, and she was super cool. And then to top it all off, Bub came in for an audition.
Yeah.
Sherman Howard. And I just happened to see his name the day before on a schedule. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. So yeah, just it's kind of crazy. A lot of these people are still in the New York scene. And
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to meet them and they were all super cool.
Oh, that's so cool, man. That's such a great story, especially considering like how much you love these movies, you know. And I'm sure they don't hear that too often where someone's gonna be like, dude, I know you. You're the alcoholic from Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah, and that's the fun thing about meeting the working class actor is they're always very humble and appreciative, unlike, many celebrities.
Right. No, it's true. Yeah, I mean, and this is, I guess, technically like an indie project, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's how George did most of his movies. It all kind of changed from what I understand when he did The Dark Half a few years later, which is a Stephen King movie, but it was a studio movie. And, he had to operate a little bit differently, but a movie worth checking out, actually.
I mean, hey man, every movie I've seen of his I've liked. One I do want to see, which I've heard great things, but I've never seen is The Crazies. I really want to see that.
Yeah, another kind of down and dirty indie movie. Yeah, definitely worth checking out, and a pretty good remake also.
Okay. There's something I specifically want to talk about, but let's jump into the remakes really quick. So I had no idea until I looked into this movie that this was remade and also A Night of the Living Dead was remade. I must have forgot about that. I knew Dawn of the Dead because I'd seen that remake a bunch and I actually really like that one.
Mhm.
But they remade all of them?
So yes, I remember in the Blockbuster video days spotting the Day of the Dead remake with it's funny, I think Ving Rhames is in it, but he's not playing the
Really?
same character as Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I remember watching it back in the day, renting it, and I barely remember anything about it. But yeah, there was that, and then there was a sequel. It was called Day of the Dead 2,
Jeez.
which I lump that in with Creepshow 3. It's just like it's a sequel in name only. People somehow got the rights to use the name, but I think it's safe to say you could skip those.
Yeah, no, I literally had no idea that they remade Day of the Dead. You've seen the Zack Snyder Dawn of the Dead remake?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah, that one's great. So I was like, okay, this one's good. Like maybe the Day of the Dead one will be good, but yeah, kind of went under the radar. And then the Night of the Living Dead remake, how is that?
Oh, that's definitely worth checking out.
Mm.
That was directed by Tom Savini.
Oh.
And Romero wrote it, and it is similar, very similar to the original. I much prefer the original,
Hmm.
but it has some interesting twists. And Tony Todd plays Ben.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it's definitely worth checking out. And it's interesting. Like I feel like Romero's his feelings on zombies change. If we want to talk about the kind of through line through the series or just something I've noticed, I feel like in the first one, the zombies are monsters. There's
Hmm.
something to be feared. And then with the next one, they're almost something to be kind of laughed at. By the time we get to the end, there's like the pie scene, and
Right.
really the humans are the biker gang is to be feared. And then by this one, I feel like we straight up sympathize with the zombies. Bub is like the best character in the movie.
Right. Getting Bub definitely gives you like a different look at the zombies. And also
Mhm.
like in 1985, there's not a ton of zombie stuff. I mean, you've got Return of the Living Dead coming out this year, and then obviously all of the whatever George Romero's movies. But it's not like zombies are like they are today, and
Mhm.
everybody knows everything about them. Like, so to have this sort of angle of having like them evolving kind
Mhm.
of, it is interesting.
Yeah, and I think that kind of carries through to the Night of the Living Dead remake, which is technically the next Romero zombie movie, because I feel like by the end of that, you are definitely sympathizing with the zombies still. And I don't know, maybe Romero has always been very cynical throughout this series, and the humans are the true evil. I mean,
Mm.
that kind of goes back all the way to the climax of the first movie. But yeah, I would definitely check out the remake. And while you're at it, have you seen Land of the Dead?
No, I was gonna ask you about that too. That's a sequel to this by George Romero, right?
Right. Yeah, that was the next one he directed after 20 years. For the longest time, it looked like, his series did end with Day of the Dead in 85. But yeah, I was there probably opening night in 2005 to see Land of the Dead. And yeah, it doesn't rank up there for me with that original trilogy, but I think it's cool that he did get to, do a kind of a bigger, more expensive kind of zombie epic. It was still modestly budgeted. It wasn't like the kind of epic that he envisioned this movie to originally be. But I definitely think it's worth checking out. It has a really good cast. Anything after that, however, oh man, yeah, not for me. Again, I'm happy that Romero got to, keep making movies into his, sunset years, but Diary of the Dead and Survival of the Dead, just yeah, not for me.
Yeah, I remember those coming out too, and yeah, I missed them all. I don't know, I think The Walking Dead like took over my zombie interests in the 2000s for a while. I just kind of got into that. But the thing that I wanted to talk about earlier too, which is like all the conversations and everything. I think the character Rhodes specifically, I think it does kind of set the tone for. Have you seen Walking Dead?
Yeah, I was pretty loyal to Walking Dead for maybe 5 seasons or so, and then jump ship.
Yeah, I didn't finish it either, but the character of Negan, I don't know if you remember him, was Jeffrey Dean Morgan's character. Did you ever see him?
Yes, yes.
And it kind of reminded me of Rhodes a bit, where I was like, okay, so it's like this just guy that's like a governor, like he's taking control. There are no rules. He's aware that there's no rules. He has the most guns. And when he just shot that doctor in the face, I was like, yeah, this reminds me a lot of what I feel like Negan would become. Or like it laid the groundwork for those kind of characters in The Walking Dead and stuff like that in the future of zombie films.
Totally. And what an incredible performance. I don't know if it's good or bad, but Joe Pilato, yeah, an incredibly memorable, quotable villain in this movie. And you could look up stories of him at horror conventions. He was quite a character in real life.
Yeah, he died young. I looked him up. He seemed like he definitely had a life.
Hmm.
And a little bit of behind the scenes, I'm sure you know about, specifically with him, is they had all those pig guts for when they were going to kill him, and apparently the fans or the refrigerator broke, so they had to keep hot, gross guts on him for 4 hours. You hear about this?
Oh, yes. I'm so glad you brought it up because I can't watch that scene without thinking of it. Yeah. So they had like bags of pig intestines that they got from a slaughterhouse. And yeah, they lost power. And I don't know how long the guts were left to rot, but from what I understand, the stench was unbearable. And this movie was shot quick and dirty. They had to get the scene. And poor Joe Pilato was left, to shoot covered in real rotting, stinking farm animal intestines. It's horrible.
Now, here's the thing. I've been a vegetarian for a very long time. If I had to do that scene, or I'm hoping he became a vegetarian after that, because it's like, dude, how can you eat anything after
Mhm.
being in that environment? But I'm sure everybody that works at a slaughterhouse is not a vegetarian, so never mind, doesn't really work. But yeah, that scene was disgusting. Amazing kill and special effects there. And what is his final line? Like, I hope you choke on it when they're dragging his legs away or
Yeah,
something.
choke on them.
Dude, that and then the kill when the dude's head is getting ripped off and he's screaming, and then his vocal cords like and like, dude, oh my God. I was like, wait, is that supposed to be his vocal cords? I was freaking out when I saw that.
These are all like show-stopping, incredible, legendary moments in 80s horror.
Ugh, so freaking good. Yeah. So yeah, Tom Savini, and then you've also got Greg Nicotero, who I know he's acting in this, but was he doing special effects as well, or just kind of learning?
Yeah, I think he was one of Savini's proteges at the time.
Mm.
And yeah, now he's like a top dog I mean, he worked constantly. He had his own company, K&B, throughout the 90s. And yeah, he's like a big dog at Walking Dead now.
I think I saw a little behind the scenes that 2 years after this movie, he took a bunch of the people from this film and then they started that company. So it's like that's fucking awesome, dude. That this movie could bring all these people together and then it could lead to, them being like, dude, let's just start our own company. And then it turns into The Walking Dead. Like
Hmm.
it's just, I don't know. I love seeing the through of horror and how it all connects and everything into modern times.
Hmm.
A question I had for you though. So I can't remember exactly how Dawn ends, but I feel like it's them getting in a helicopter and flying away, right?
Yes. And I don't know if you actually, sorry, I don't want to derail your question.
No, what's up? What's up?
Something that always stuck out to me in this movie was, we have this fantastic climax where the military guys are getting torn apart and our heroes are, battling zombies in the cavern. And I love the way it's lit. It's like red and blue. It's like something out of Creep Show.
Yep, yep.
And then they escape to the helicopter. And I always felt like, whoa, did they just run out of money or something?
Yeah, yeah.
Because all of a sudden there's this jump scare and boom, we're on an island and our heroes are safe. But yeah, it just always kind of stood out to me. But I've never heard anything like that. Like I mean, this movie obviously is a very compromised version of a much more expensive movie. So who knows what kind of rewrites happened. But yeah, that the ending has always stood out to me as a bit strange.
Dude, I hated that. When that happened, I was like, what the fuck? I like said it out loud. And then they're on a beach and it's like, what? And the credits start. I was like, no way. But but so Dawn did end with them flying away on a helicopter though, right? And then this one starts with them flying in a helicopter. Am I
Yes.
crazy or that? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if the first time I watched this with my friends, if we for a moment thought these were the survivors of Dawn of the Dead at the very beginning?
I did immediately. I was like, wait, she was blonde, I think. And I was like, and that guy didn't have a Jamaican accent. I was like, okay, never mind. But yeah, but for the very beginning, I was like, yeah, okay, so they still have their helicopter, cool. And then they're in Florida, so I was like, all right, okay, never mind. I have no idea what's going on there. So I guess that leads into my main question then. I understand there really can't be a, connection between one and two because I think everybody dies. I know the guy gets shot at the end, but I think everybody else is dead in the house too. Why do you think George Romero didn't have characters that led on, or is it more just about the progression of the zombie apocalypse and what it would do to different groups of people? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question that I don't think I've ever heard him address. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know that like what a great fourth movie would have been if, we had the survivors like Ken Foray with the survivors from Day of the Dead. How great would that have been? But yeah, I don't know. Maybe he just wanted to get different perspectives, but I wish I knew.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't bother me, but I've been watching that Planet of the Apes trilogy and everything's connected, so I'm like, come on, bring them together. But
Mhm.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't bother me really. But I guess it would be cool if they said something like, no, they're because where did the Dawn take place in Pittsburgh, right? Right in a mall in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, so the first two took place in the Pittsburgh area, and this one takes place in Florida.
Yeah, so it would have been cool if they're like there's a radio signal coming out of like the Pittsburgh area. It would have been cool to see like oh that, but I guess it doesn't really matter. I think I'm thinking of that from like a modern audience point of view where I'm just like everything has to be connected.
Right, right.
And it doesn't. But yeah, I mean, I guess like I know we're super late into this episode, but like the plot of this is basically like there's a group of scientists, they're on this base, and there's a group of military people that's supposed to protect them. And the scientists are kind of like split, like they're trying to like cure it, but then also create a vaccine, it seems like. And
Mhm.
then the military people are just like, we're kind of getting sick of all this bullshit. And their commanding officer dies, so a new guy takes control, and the whole dynamic of the base changes after that, basically.
And we haven't even mentioned one of my favorite characters in this movie, Logan, but he's known mostly as Dr. Frankenstein, and he's this
Right.
fantastically over the top mad scientist who is, experimenting on the zombies, trying to learn anything he can about them, trying to essentially make pets out of them, or trying to get them to behave.
Yeah, I know. And that's such like today that's like not that big of a crazy idea, but back then it's like, dude, this guy's taking off people's heads. There's brain stems that are moving. Like this guy is a psychopath.
Yeah, I mean, so much of this movie and of this series has been explored in so many movies and obviously a dozen seasons of The Walking Dead and all the spin-offs. But when you think about like you said, this is where it all starts. You can see the roots of all the things that came later here.
Right. And that's like my biggest suggestion to any like young person watching a movie. Like try every single time you watch a film, put yourself in the shoes of a person watching this for the first time in 1985 or whatever. Because yeah, you might just be like, "No, this isn't that good." Or it's like young people that listen to the Beatles now, they're like, "It's not that good," because you've heard it just being homogenized by a million other things that now this doesn't seem as impactful. But I don't know. Once I've changed my perspective on how I watch movies, I think that's made me love them so much more. I can look at this movie and it doesn't take away that, yeah, a million movies and TV shows have done an evil doctor that does experiments on zombies or whatever. But to see it here and know that this is probably the first time this has been done, it's interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree.
Yeah, and I also love when Dr. Frankenstein like walks into that room and they're all arguing. The scientists, the military, everybody's fighting, and he just walks in there and he's like, "Is there any food?" And he's just kind of like doesn't care. And I've seen that kind of dynamic before too, where it's like this guy would probably have shot him if he was in the room when all that shit was going down. But then all of a sudden he just walks in, very cavalier, doesn't give a shit, just keeps ignoring the question, asking for food, and the guy doesn't do anything. He's just kind of like, "All right, this guy's an idiot. He's not a threat to me. Like." I'll play his little game, I guess.
Hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, I love all the character interactions, and again, like it might be a little too talky for some people, but I think a lot of these conversations are fascinating and even kind of tense. Like this the scene where Rhodes tells Sarah to sit down or he's going to shoot her. I mean, I've
Oh
seen
yeah.
this movie so many times, and I felt a little tense watching it.
For sure, dude. I was like, I don't know if he's gonna kill anybody. And then he does just shoot that doctor in the head. Frankenstein and the other guy just boom, like point blank, didn't give a shit. Another line that stood out to me is right in the beginning with that Miguel guy when she's like, "Come on, we got to get you out of here, like you're tired or whatever." He's like, "You're so strong. Good for you. You're stronger than everybody." And then it was just kind of like, damn, that felt real. Like that
Mhm.
felt like I don't know, especially that early in the movie. I was just like, "Ooh, I like this."
Also, something that should be said is this movie probably has been introduced to like a whole new generation because it was prominently featured in Stranger Things season 3.
This movie was?
Yes, there's a
Oh.
scene, I think in the first episode, where the kids go to see it at a movie theater, and the first like minute or two of the movie, the scene where Sarah's in that, it's kind of a dream sequence, and all the hands come out to grab her.
Oh, yeah.
That scene, and even bits of music from this movie. I know later in the season, I noticed music from the movie in a scene of Stranger Things. So I'm sure a lot of younger people have been curious of what this movie is and have probably checked it out.
Yeah. Well, I did notice the one song that is Robot Chicken's intro. They played it in this briefly for a moment again.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, do you not know that? The Robot Chickens, it's like dun 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 dun. That's Robot Chicken's intro song.
Oh, yes. I so associate that with Dawn of the Dead, but yeah, there is a scene in this movie where they play it.
Yeah, so there's always, little connections, but I'm glad that this movie is getting, reanalyzed by the youth and stuff. That's cool. And especially after Walking Dead, I'm sure they're just like, oh yeah, this makes sense. I like this.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely. I think I prefer the music in Dawn of the Dead the most, though. The Goblin soundtrack. I fucking love that soundtrack.
Yeah, definitely. This one is it's not as iconic as that Goblin soundtrack. It's still pretty cool. I think John Harrison is his name. He did the music for Creepshow as well. I have the Waxwork vinyl soundtrack, and I'll admit I did listen to it a bit getting ready for this podcast.
Hell yeah.
So yeah, it's yeah, not as great as that, but it still has its moments, and it's another example of just kind of Romero working with his little crew. I love how he has his theater troupe, and that's why these movies, even if they don't all connect in a cinematic universe kind of way, they all still feel like they're of a piece.
Yeah, and I think that, having George A. Romero write and direct all of them really helps.
Mhm.
All right, well, Joe, you have any last minute thoughts on Day of the Dead?
You know what? I feel like again, I might not love it as much as those other two, but in its own way, it's just as essential. So yeah, if you haven't seen it, check it out.
Yeah, it's absolutely worth watching. Absolutely. If you love zombies, if you love George A. Romero, if you love horror, check it out. All right, well, everybody, thank you very much for listening into our episode on Day of the Dead. And we will see you all tomorrow with something. All right, everybody, have a good one. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks again, Joe.
Thank you.